Hey y'all, it's Kate and Bree. Welcome to the 4th episode of the Texas Missing podcast. Now, Bree, I believe you have a small announcement to make.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm sick. So if I sound a little wonky on this episode, that's why. This is my man voice, basically.
So we're going to try something a little bit different with this episode. So normally, both of us will research the case, and then we'll kind of go back and forth during the episode. Well, for this episode, I am the only one that researched the case, so Bree doesn't know anything about it, and we'll just try and kind of like more or less have like a natural conversation about it. And maybe she'll be asking questions that you guys will have too. So that's what we're going to try for this episode. We appreciate all feedback as well. So once you listen to the episode, send us a message. Let us know how you like this format, or if you like the format where both of us are researching the case.
Yeah, we're new, so we're just testing stuff out and seeing what works best and what people like to listen to.
Exactly. So with that being said, let's get into it. So Patricia Ann Becks, who also went by Patricia Ann Mason, I'm pretty sure Mason was her maiden name. She was born August 6th of 1966, so that would have made her about 27 years old when she went missing. Patricia, she went missing in Waxahachie, Texas, which is about 30 miles south of Dallas. It's not a huge town. Population is maybe around 45,000 at this point. So the day of July 7th, 1994, Patricia was seen at work at the Golden Corral in Waxahachie. Later that day, she was picked up from work by a friend and dropped off at her home. Now, I have 2 potential addresses of where her home was, just because I've been looking at police reports and also online, and it was either the 200 block of Murdoch or an apartment complex off of Martin Luther King Boulevard. So it was one of the 2. So from her residence, Patricia was last seen walking to her friend's home, which was within the vicinity of Patricia's home. So the last person to see Patricia was an unknown person who told police that they had watched Patricia's estranged husband, Archie Becks, and an acquaintance of his, possibly a Dennis Miller, approach Patricia while she was walking to her friend's house. That instance is the last time she was seen, and the subject who reported this did not see Patricia get into a vehicle with the men, nor did they see the actual encounter. But whoever reported this obviously knew who Patricia's husband was, so I'm thinking maybe it was her neighbor, or even her friend that, she was supposed to be going to meet that night. But I would assume that it's got to be someone that at least semi knows her if they knew who Archie was and that he approached her.
Did they say where they saw it? Like, was it in front of her house, or was it...
They did not.
It just on the street?
Yeah, they literally said just on the street when she was walking, they watched Archie approach.
Yeah. Well, and at this point, in, the mid-90s, Waxahachie is not that big right now.
No.
It would have been very small town at that point in time, so.
Yeah. So... Speaking of Archie, he will play a very big part in this case. So with that, let's take a look at Patricia and Archie's relationship timeline, as it is very tumultuous, and it'll be tied back to some of the theories that maybe happened to Patricia. And I do want to talk about a trigger warning with domestic violence and sexual assault. We'll be talking about those quite a bit in this episode. So Patricia and Archie were married in 1988. And by address records, it appears that they lived in Waxahachie for their entire relationship. In October of 1992, Patricia was arrested for aggravated assault. In Texas, the elements of this offense are assault with the addition of either family violence or exhibiting or using a deadly weapon during the commission of an assault. And in this case, it appears that both were present. According to court documents obtained from Ellis County, Patricia was charged with ag assault, and the verdict stated the following. Patricia Ann Becks did then and there intentionally and knowingly threaten to cause bodily injury or death to Archie Becks by shooting in his direction with a deadly weapon, to wit, a handgun. Now, unfortunately, I was unable to find the original offense report, so we could at least get a better understanding of the incident. You know how it was going on domestic disturbances. Oftentimes, they are super convoluted, and it ends up being a he said, she said incident. And so I don't think we get the full picture when we're just reading the court documents. I think we get a much better understanding if you at least read the entire offense report that occurred that night.
Yeah. So let me just get this straight. She actually shot at him.
Yes, that's what the court documents state, that she had the gun and she shot in his direction. But we don't know what happened before that. You know, that's all that we have to go off of. And I tried to get the offense report, and nothing came up. I received no feedback other than it wasn't available. And so it's hard to really judge what happened during that incident without that.
Yeah. I think before the cases were digital, I think it's hard going back and finding some of those because they're literally just on paper.
Yeah, in almost all of them there's no digital record of them, so it's hard to, obtain them.
Yeah.
So, but something odd though is that there is, within those court documents, there was an order of dismissal that was dated 6/11 of 93. So my guess is Archie dropped the charges, or there was insufficient evidence. But most of the time when there's something like that, it's difficult to get those charges just completely dropped.
Well, it's the state picks them up.
Yeah,
at that point.
That didn't happen. They're dropped. Yeah. So according to, because there's a ledger that came with the court documents, and the last portion of that ledger is that it was dropped.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and that would have been nice to get a little bit more information on that, but
yeah,
nothing. So moving on, in September of 1993. Archie apparently beat Patricia and held a gun to her head and threatened to kill her. There is no police report for this that I could find, so either there was a report and no offense came from it, or the police were just never called in general, and I'll explain how I got that information later on. And finally, July 13th of 1994, Archie once again beat Patricia, putting her in the hospital, and also threatened to shoot her. This offense report was also not found, but I'll explain again how I obtained this information as well. So, sometime between July 13th and July 20th of 1994, Patricia filed for and received a temporary ex parte order, which is a protective order that can be filed when a member of a household can articulate to the courts a clear and present danger of family violence. Hence, Patricia filed the order on Archie, and he was listed as the respondent. I was able to find the actual order that Patricia filed, and it stated the following. On July 13th, 1994, family violence occurred when Archie began beating Patricia. Patricia woke up in the hospital. Archie later made the statement to her, "Wait until we get home, bitch. I've got something for you." Patricia strongly believes that Archie is talking about using the gun, since he has made numerous threats that he will shoot her. In September of 1993, Archie came to a friend's house where Patricia was and began beating her. He dragged her down the street to his house and then held a gun to her head. And if y'all remember, I said that Patricia went missing July 28th, which is literally just a few days after she filed that protective order. And the day before, Archie was supposed to make a court appearance in regards to the protective order. So I find that very suspicious.
Yeah.
Just the time frame of it.
What a coincidence.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there is coincidences.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that she was able to receive a protective order without any case being filed against Archie, because typically in the state of Texas, now I don't know what it was like in 1997, but here you have to have clear and convincing evidence that an offense has taken place and that you're in danger of further threat of violence.
Yeah.
Extreme violence. Because, just a Class C assault, a judge is not going to sign off on a protective order. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if she had health records or medical records saying, hey, she was beaten up, whatever, and provided that. But even then, you would think that the police department would file a case after the fact.
Yeah, and I even thought maybe there was just offense reports that I wasn't able to find. But if you look at Archie's criminal history, there is nothing for domestic violence.
There's no arrest for domestic violence. So
my guess is maybe the hospital
she had to have something.
Were damning, and they showed evidence of abuse and assault. And when she mentioned the incident that happened in September, she was at a friend's house, and obviously those friends watched him drag her out of the house. Yeah. So maybe she was able to gain witnesses to kind of contribute to the pattern of abuse from him.
Yeah. Well, and maybe they did file an offense report later, but she's gone now. So it's not like they could have arrested him. There's no victim.
Probably wasn't. Yeah, ended up being dropped.
Yeah. And that adds another aspect to this case too. Like if she did file an offense report for domestic violence, and it could have been the event at the friend's house, and that would cause Archie to incur very serious charges. Mm-hmm. So, but if there's no victim, really,
it kind of goes away. Yeah. And maybe that was his thinking if he was the culprit, which I'm leaning towards, but we'll go into more of that later. So unfortunately, that is really the end of the timeline that includes Patricia, but not so much for Archie. So fast forward to 2013. If you didn't already have your suspicions about Archie and his morality, this will probably push you in the right direction. So in September of 2013, Archie was sentenced to prison for 60 years for sexual assault of a child. The Dallas Morning News reported that Archie repeatedly molested a 13-year-old female and continued to do so after his initial arrest and release. First, I kind of have several questions about how he was still able to be in contact with her after he initially was arrested and released, because he was right back where she was. So I have some questions about how he was allowed to be around her after that. But something interesting also in the article is that one of the victim's siblings stated, even after Archie was arrested, he often went into the teen's room during the night and touched her inappropriately. So I'm not for sure the dynamic of the victim and Archie.
He was probably dating the mom of his
and that's kind of where my head went, is that he was living with them, and then he was dating their mother.
Yeah. And I think as a parent, if you don't protect your child,
that's disgusting.
That's on you.
Yeah.
And you should also be charged with that.
Yeah, he's allowed to be right back into the home.
Yeah.
As the victim, I can't imagine how traumatizing it would be to have the bravery to come out and list him as a suspect, but then once he's arrested and released, he's allowed to be back in your home.
Yeah.
And that's disgusting. Now, something good that came from this is, as I said, Archie was sentenced to 60 years, and he has to serve at least 30 of those years before he has a chance for parole. So he would be just about, I think, 82 or 83 when that happened. So at least he's tucked away for what seems to be quite a while.
Yeah. He needs to be.
Yeah, all of that.
He's not safe to the general public. Like, he's a danger to society. He needs to be locked away.
Yeah.
Just keep him. He's probably
Keep him.
probably not gonna live till he's 82 anyway.
No, probably not. So let's skip to the present day. This part of the case to me is, I don't want to use exciting. I think I've talked to like about using the word excited when it comes to these cases, but maybe compelling might be the better word. So I filed for an open records request for Patricia's initial missing person case from the Waxahachie Police Department.
And remember, every time we filed an open records request up to this point, every single bit of it has been redacted, or they say that they can't find it.
Right. And that's going to be a majority of the case when we're applying for these open records requests, because these cases are not closed. They have not been solved. They are still open, and although most of them are considered cold cases, because they are still open and they're active, a lot of the information is not public. So although I didn't receive her original case, I did receive a supplement to her original case. This supplement included the first updates on the case since 1994. In 2012, detectives were contacted by an acquaintance of Archie's. This subject stated that on several occasions in 2009, he would go over to Archie's home to drink alcohol, and that in an indirect way, Archie may have implicated himself as the person who murdered Patricia. The subject noted that he did not have proof of this, and Archie never directly stated that he killed Patricia. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about the specifics that he told the detective, but just know they are gruesome and heinous.
They're terrible.
Yeah, it's gross.
I don't think that this acquaintance would have made up something that terrible. So if Archie told this acquaintance about the incident in 2009, why did it take him so long to contact police? Did you ever find that out?
No, and I also caught on to that. I thought it was a little odd. Like, what would bring you after 3 years to all of a sudden go and tell police this information? Usually there's some type of driving factor.
Was Archie already in prison in 2012?
No, he went to prison in 2013. He was sentenced in 2013. And so he was still, I think he was... Now, I know there was a moment where he was arrested for the initial charge and then he was released, but I don't have that exact info. So at some point in 2012, he could have been in jail.
Okay. And he might have felt safe, like, finally coming to police, because he's like, hey, maybe this guy is not going to get out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously he has a history of violence, so he could have very well been afraid of him, and once he was arrested, that he felt safer to go to the police and talk to them about this. Because, I mean, from all accounts, it kind of appears that Archie was possibly getting back at Patricia for going to the police on him. So maybe that was his thought process. Well, you know, he potentially did something to Patricia. So when I received the supplement, I also found the detective's name, and I reached out to him.
Yeah, I know you called me and you were nervous about reaching out to him because you thought he was going to tell you to hand the whole thing.
Yeah, he was going to, like, shut me down, and I'm not for sure why.
It's because you're not used to receiving information like that. Like, you got that full unredacted supplement, which is surprising.
Yeah.
I honestly thought he was probably going to tell you to can it.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be like, oh, you accidentally received that.
Yeah.
But no, he was actually really nice. And he was more just wanting to figure out how I stumbled upon Patricia's case. He specifically said that there is not a lot of information about her, and even publicity just about, no one in Waxahachie, a majority of the town, even know who she is. And so
it happened so long ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But
almost 30 years.
Yeah, and it is coming up on 30 years. But basically, I just went in with the detective on our purpose and how our entire purpose is to highlight those cases that are less known. And so he completely understood. So obviously, the detective wasn't able to give me a whole lot of detail, as the case, as we talked about, it's still ongoing. But he was able to confirm that on the original report, there was a witness that did state they saw Archie approach Patricia on the street that night she went missing. And there is one more bit of information that could be incredibly important. The detective stated that recently there has been some information received that could possibly break the case wide open. And he had to kind of leave it at that. He couldn't tell me anything more, but...
Has he gone back and interviewed Archie by any chance?
So I don't know if he specifically has spoken to Archie, but he did tell me that previous detectives have went and spoken to Archie, but they have not been able to find definitive proof to tie him to her disappearance. And so that's why it's still open. There's just an all-around lack of information and evidence.
But he's sitting on something that could potentially break the case wide open.
And he had to leave it at that. He couldn't go into more detail, which I totally understood. But, after almost 30 years, I think that would be great if her remains could at least be found and that she could be, have a proper burial. But
based on some of the information that we're excluding from the podcast, I don't necessarily know if remains will be found, but as long as justice can be served, that would be a start.
Yeah, and,
I mean, he's probably not getting out of prison anyway, but...
Well, and I was thinking, because he will not have the opportunity to make parole until 30 years, maybe they can use that as leverage. Like, what else does he have to lose? He's probably going to be in prison the rest of his life. Like, why not just go ahead and come out and say what happened? But I don't think he's that type.
No, I don't think he will.
Based off of his history, he probably doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, because at this point, even though it's, he's got a chance for parole, even though it's in the distant future.
Yeah, he'd be 82.
If he admits to murder, there is no chance for parole.
Yeah.
At all.
But also, what would he gain from telling the truth or helping detectives? He wouldn't gain anything.
I don't know, maybe they could sweeten his deal a little bit. Some kind of special accommodations or something. Not necessarily early parole, because nobody wants him released at this point. No. He's a danger to the general public.
Yeah, so. Well, and I think that would be the only way that he would even be willing to help investigators if they were able to cut time, and no one wants to cut his time.
No.
He needs to be in prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he would be willing to offer up any of that information unless the deal really,
maybe special privileges in prison. I don't know. I don't know what they could possibly give him, that would make him want to give him
maybe like a facility transfer.
Yeah, literally anything.
Lines, something that would benefit him in any type of way, because he sure as hell doesn't seem like the type that would do anything unless he's benefited from it.
Yeah, well, and I've seen his picture, and I don't think he's going to be making an escape anytime soon. So I don't think that like a prison transfer would really be, dangerous or hazardous.
So based off all the information that I have told you today, is there any kind of raising questions that you have regarding any of it?
No, I think it'll just be interesting to see this case evolve, especially since the detective has something that we're not privy to, some kind of information. I hope that they're able to act on that and charge him with her murder if she is indeed deceased, which I think she is, because I know that you told me that there was also possibly like a jail informant that had also said kind of a similar story as...
Yeah, so that was another little bit of information that the detective was able to share, that there was someone in prison that was going to be in prison for life, and they had contacted the police, the Waxahachie police, stating that they had information, but the information was all hearsay. It wasn't anything that they could use to bring charges against Archie or to locate her remains.
The story was similar to what the
Yes.
first
Yes. So,
person said.
the most prevalent theory is that Archie did kill Patricia because she filed the temporary order on him. And I think my guess is that charges were coming for him involving domestic violence because that temporary order was activated. And so I think he did it purely out of spite and to get rid of her.
For sure.
And that is the overlapping theory that he did have something to do with it. And matter of fact, I haven't seen or heard a theory that involves anybody else other than Archie.
Yeah, because I know you said her social security has never been used since. And
No.
There's been no activity.
No trace. Because sometimes you can Google missing person names and they'll be like last spotted here,
Yeah.
last sighted here. There is nothing on her. Matter of fact, there's not even news articles that include her name. The only thing that pops up when you Google her is the DPS missing website, the Jane Doe website, where someone has entered in all of her criteria in her photo, and then name is. And that's it.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of where we leave it. But Patricia is a Black female, and at the time of her disappearance, she was 5'6" and weighed 120 pounds. Today, she would be 57 years old. If you have any information regarding her disappearance, please reach out to Waxahachie Police Department. And as always, make sure to follow us on social media, as I will post Patricia's photos and case info on our social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok, which are all under the handle @TheTexasMissing. And make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. And with that being said, I'm Kate.
And I'm Bree.
And this is the Texas Missing Podcast.